Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode, Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sarah. What movie are we doing this week?
This week, we will be talking about Radioactive. And Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
Trigger warning. This movie contains depictions of misogyny, cancer, adultery, women speaking their minds, war, parental death, parents lying to and potentially parents lying to children, childhood trauma, missing limbs, spectrumy social awkwardness, and Anya Taylor-Joy's unnervingly large eyes. Sarah, can you think of anything I may have left out?
Nope. Rena, can you please give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning! We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
Some of the sources we used in this episode include coverage about Marie Curie and this film from The Decider, River Online, The Curies, a biography of the most controversial family in science by Dennis Bryan.
Sarah, can you please tell us a little bit about Marie Curie?
Of course. Marie Curie was a Polish and naturalized French physicist and chemist who conducted pioneering research on radioactivity. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, the first person to win a Nobel Prize twice, and the only person to win a Nobel Prize in two scientific fields. Her husband, Pierre, was a co-winner of her first Nobel Prize, making them the first married couple to win a legacy of 5 Nobel Prizes. She was in 1906 the first woman to become a professor at the University of Paris, and she died at the age of 66 in 1934 of aplastic anemia, likely caused by her work. That's from our friends at Wikipedia. Also from our friends at Wikipedia, the movie Radioactive is a 2019 British film directed by Marjane Sartrapi, written by Jack Thorne and starring Rosamund Pike as Marie Curie. The film is based on the 2010 graphic novel Radioactive, Marie and Pierre Curie, A Tale of Love and Fallout by Lauren Redness. The film premiered as the closing night gala at the 2019 Toronto International Film Festival, and it was scheduled to be released in theaters in 2020, but its opening was canceled due to the COVID pandemic. So it was released digitally in the UK later that year by Studio Canal, and it also started streaming shortly thereafter on Amazon Prime.
And it was a frustrating film for me because I love Marjane Sartrapi. I love Persepolis. I have all of her graphic novels in French, and that's what I use to get my French back into shape since I've read Persepolis in English so many times. And I appreciate her as an artist of multiple disciplines and as an auteur. But even though her visuals in this film are incredible, I don't feel that she's found the right script or the right storytelling method. And it is a very uneven film and flawed. I'm a huge admirer of her vision, and I also especially admire her activism on behalf of the woman life freedom movement in her native Iran. Film is what she's moved on to, but I really miss her voice as a graphic novelist, and I'm not sure what story she still would have to tell with that. So it's sort of something I have to let go of and let her evolve have room for her to evolve as a filmmaker.
I was struck by this dramatic difference in quality of the pacing of this film and the writing of this film and the visual styling of this film. I don't want to tell her to go be a director of photography or a cinematographer, but that is very much where the strengths of this film lie, is in the visual sensibility of it. It's a movie made by a master visual artist with a screenplay that feels like it was written in crayon, because the writing is just so on the nose. The disparity between those elements is very present throughout this project. So let's talk a little bit about this movie. The framework is very much a thing we've seen many, many times, which is opening with someone about to die and then flashing back.
Yes, we saw this with Richard Burton in Liz and Dick. We have seen it in strong movies. We have seen it in weak ones. There's probably still an original way of doing this particular opening, but this was not it. We open on old Marie in 1934, collapsing, and we see she has like this redness on her hands that looks like when babies get hand, foot, and mouth disease, only angrier.
I would also comment here from the jump, like these people frolic about in radioactive poison the same way one might go to a pool and go swimming. It's kind of amazing that she lived as long as she did.
You see Marie and Pierre using a glowing vial of radium as a nightlight that they keep by the bed, and they're both touching it and handling it and carrying radium around with them, and in a lab full of radium while she's pregnant. And you see her little kid walking into the lab and touching the equipment, and it's all, no, don't do that.
I just rewatched Chernobyl, the miniseries. Those people were all dead in like a week after just looking at it. So I'm pretty impressed that they held on as long as they did.
While Marie and her daughter Irene died at, in an actuarial sense, not that old, her other daughter Eve, where everyone was like, oh, she's not going to be a scientist, is she good at anything? It seems like she's good at music, she can write, but where they were despairing of her not being as brilliant as the rest of them, it sounds like, who was not a scientist, following in her mother's footsteps and thus not around radium all the time, like Irene. Eve lived to be over 100. She died in this century. That family had some major, like, longevity genes going that they all managed it with that much radium around them. Anyway.
Off the top, like Rosamund Pike is very good in this movie. I'll watch her in most things. She's a really interesting actress to watch. She's contributed some really interesting performances to the cultural space over the last few years. I mean, Gone Girl, there's a Netflix movie called I Care a Lot where she's a vicious monster in that. She's also amazing in Saltburn. I was excited to watch her in this. She's if I can look that good at the age of 66, dying of radiation poisoning, like I'll take it.
So we cut back to the young Maria Sklodowska in Paris in 1893 and her meet-cute with future husband Pierre Curie. This never happened. This is not how they met. So they actually met at a friend's apartment. I love a meet-cute because they just, how does it happen, Sarah? They just bump into each other.
She's reading a smart person book. They bump into each other. She drops the book. And he's all, oh, hey, are you interested in that topic? And she's like, I'm interested in all science. And then keeps on walking. Honestly, like if you bumped into a guy this way on the street now, he would probably be enticing you to bump into him so he could show you his penis under his coat. Love it here. What an adventure. So also I want to just give a little welcome to the show to actor Sam Riley, who plays Pierre in this. He is someone we'll be seeing again. He is in the movie Control, which is about Joy Division, and Firebrand, which we've talked about watching before. And he's also on the cutting room floor of the movie 24-Hour Party People.
I love 24-Hour Party People.
Yes, so we will see and speak of him again. And he's great in this.
Yeah, I think so too.
He's great.
He's dreamy.
Yeah, we see her going in to meet with some science people who give her space.
That's the problem. They won't give her space for her to do things properly with her equipment. It gets tampered with, and they're being disrespectful. And one of the things I loved about this movie is how blunt and Aspergery Marie Curie is, which seems like true to life. She didn't care about how she looked. She would ask her daughter, like, why do you walk around with stilt things on your shoes? What I saw here was it's as if she had lived as a man and then accidentally woken up as a woman, indignant at experiencing every micro and macro aggression as if for the first time, every single time.
She is rightfully complaining about these things, and one of the dudes who's listening to her says something like, she's presenting me with constant demands. That if this were a man-ness of this movie is pretty. The thing is with this screenplay is there's no subtext whatsoever to anything happening in this movie. It is all text. And if you missed what they showed you, they will tell you in another minute what you just saw. She has this interaction and it's very clear what happened. And in the next scene, she's like, is it because I'm a woman? And it's like, well, yeah, I think, yeah. The movie visually set that up pretty nicely by making her the only woman in the room and a bunch of men downplaying her concerns because it's adorable that this woman's doing science.
She is one of 23 women out of over 1,800 students at the university in Paris.
There's a lot of elegance in the movement of the film. The movie is so hitting above its weight when it comes to what you're looking at. And then the script is so on the nose every chance it gets. And
the only parts where the script is enjoyable is when it's capturing how spectrumy and awkward and blunt she is.
The thing that is subversive and great about this throughout is she's very much the man.
You see that in The Marriage, where Pierre is the one who's into spiritualism and she's like, this is stupid. And we see this scene where she is with her sister talking about, like, is it because I'm a woman? Where she says to her sister, your child is crying. Shouldn't you assume some sort of motherly disposition?
Amazing. I hope this is what she was really like. We see her go to the theater and she's watching this dancer, Loie Fuller, and she runs into Pierre again. Visually, this sequence was beautiful in terms of how they're talking about like the movement of particles and of science and showing the dancing and everything. It's when you find out she found a new element.
They found two new elements.
Yeah, NBD, right? Just finding two new elements. For all of the young women listening out there, like this is the kind of partnership to aspire to in terms of
Agreed.
She is in a lot of ways more traditionally the man role in the relationship, but also he's just very accepting of her as she is and invested in who she is as a person. And he's not trying to throw a bucket on her light and diminish her in any way. He's constantly supporting her in a time period where like it was even more awful to try and be a female in the world. They have a really wonderful dynamic that again I hope was real to their relationship because they seem very happy together most of the time and also challenge each other in a really nice way.
We also see her meet a colleague of her husband's, Paul Langevin, and his wife, who comes across as stupid and boring. Langevin will subsequently become her lover after Pierre dies. I noted that the actors look too similar to each other, and it's confusing, but the real life Langevin and the real Curie looked similar. I would guess Marie has a type.
Yeah.
And then one of the issues with the film is that it hung this thing on her of being afraid of hospitals because her mother died in one, which is not real.
This is such a weird choice.
It is completely out of character for how they're presenting her. It's an unnecessary device, and the real Mrs. Sladowska died at home, and the child actress that they've picked, I looked at her and I thought, there is no way that this child grows up to be Rosamund Pike.
Fair enough. I've been made to understand that the casting of child actors is like you are just sort of like can you function in front of a camera? You're in. I think like they take what they can get when it comes to that. We talk a lot on this show, and we should continue to explore what it means like to be a biopic and what the truth is and what you represent in the work artistically in order to tell the story and where you take the liberties. This is a weird ass liberty to take.
It is. And this is something where there's greater pathos in what happened in real life. In this fake scene where the dying Mrs. Sladowska basically traumatizes little Marie by saying, well, if you kiss me, you can cure me. There, I'm cured, when no, this isn't what's happening, and you're completely messing with the child's head. She knew she had TB. She had it for a while. Dennis Bryan writes, Bronislava kept all her children at arm's length, but her apparent coldness was an act of loving concern. It was the way she tried to protect them from the tuberculosis she had contracted soon after Marie's birth. Not understanding this, young Marie wondered why, that before she went to sleep, her mother gently stroked her forehead, but never kissed her, which is so sad.
It's so sad.
And instead, we're given this, she's afraid of hospitals, and her mother lies to her about being cured with a kiss while on her deathbed. Lying to your kid that kissing you will heal your terminal disease is terrible parenting. This bugged me the whole time that I was watching this, though, because Pike's hair is sandy blonde, but the little girl in this has light brown hair, and hair darkens as children age. It doesn't become light in a time where they do not have dyeing methods to get it to look this natural, nor would a woman who we establish in this film does not care about her appearance at all go to this trouble to get her hair highlighted. I found it visually, it took me out of the world.
Do you know what I'm thinking about right now?
What?
I was thinking about Rami Malek's teeth.
Because I'd had no problem with them in Bohemian.
Like, I know that you could go on about that hair a lot longer. Just an observation about the things that bother you.
Versus the things I don't notice.
Listen, I got my things too. Yeah, this is very bad parenting to lie to your child like that. But it's also a weird thing to make up because it doesn't serve any dramatic tension in the film to be like, oh, she's afraid of hospitals. I don't even understand the point of that character quirk is in serving the dramatic action of the movie.
Is it to give her a weakness? Because there are other things you can establish as weaknesses that actually make sense, rather than, oh, she's afraid of hospitals despite being a woman of science.
There's plenty of other things that she does in this movie that are irritating and human, that move it along, where if you had just cut this, you could have saved 10 minutes and made this movie a little bit more bearable.
It is a boring movie. So they go on this idyllic honeymoon. They come back and she presents to the committee. I did love her joyfully sticking it to the committee with how right she is. They've found radium in pitchblende, and you see her like, it looks like a big bucket of charcoal where she's just like hammering at it with a stick. And they have to go through all of these things to first gradually get that little bit of uranium out of the pitchblende.
There's a bunch of stuff, just knowing what we know about radiation poisoning now, that made me almost want to vomit in this. Watching her do that was one of them, just because I'm going like, oh my God, that's so much poison. We see this sequence where Pierre is showing all of like the different things that people are putting radium in for seemingly the sake of putting it in there, like in chocolate and in
toothpaste and matches and ladies' facial powder. And Loie Fuller wants him to make her a radioactive jacket. He tells her, we don't make jackets. It's crazy. So the Curies refuse a patent on any... Oh, right. She always says patent instead of patent.
They want to keep it something that scientists can continue to work with. And well, one of the things that I think this movie does is it shows how scientists kind of like evolve from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and imparts that in terms of showing like how what she did inspires other people and shows the chain of good and bad that happens as a result of her discoveries. It doesn't do it with a lot of nuance,
Mm-hmm.
but it does do it. And that's a nice thing to see, because I think like in here, the year of our Lord 2024, which is coming to an end soon, like we've seen a lot of people get really upset about how science isn't straightforward, and then they turn that into a reason to not believe science. But like this shows like that it is a process, and it's a path, and it's constant iteration, and it's people learning from each other and building on what was already done in order to figure things out. You see like how their science was used to treat cancer.
There's this idea that good ideas are simple. No, lots of good ideas are super complicated and building on things, and our desire for simple answers is our undoing, to get overly in the weeds with it there. So there are a bunch of flash forwards that were very on the nose, and I found them boring.
They're not nuanced, but visually there's one in particular where they show the atomic testing taking place in 1961 at the government named Doomtown, where you see what happens when a nuclear bomb explodes, and they had built like this entire fake town to demonstrate the power of an atomic bomb and how it would kill all these people. And they show this, and it's a very arresting sequence in terms of the way it's shot. Is the dialogue good? No, but it's a really visually sumptuous scene, and there's a lot of really beautiful cinematography in it. And I really liked that. I liked the way that they played with color in those flash forwards.
What's occurred to me now is I think that the perfect way to watch Radioactive would be projected onto the wall in a dark room with the dialogue completely off and music in the background as part of like a blacklight party with a lot of people on a lot of drugs.
I wonder if it syncs up to Dark Side of the Moon
I don't know.
or Kid A or
Satrapi is coming from the world of the graphic novel. In comic books, sometimes within a cycle or a saga, they'll cut away from the main story to some minor character having their side story before cutting back, I guess, to space out the story over multiple issues. That's very much what these digressions feel like to me, but mostly they bored me.
going to suggest how they could have done it better. It didn't necessarily all flow very nicely, but I felt like the sequences were really, really interesting to look at. And you could tell that not only was the source material a graphic novel, but also that a visual artist storyboarded the shit out of this movie in order to capture these images.
I would love to see the storyboards for this. What else do we see here? There's the talk of it curing cancer. She gives birth to their daughter, Irene. They go to see Loie Fuller. Some friend of Loie Fuller's is this quack who thinks she can use radiation to contact Beethoven.
Sure.
And Pierre is open to this idea, and Marie is like, no. So there's a scene of her being irritated at Pierre's spiritualism. And this is on the note of, wow, she really is the dude in the relationship, because he's open to noodly, what we call New Age, and she's the hard scientist. Well, they're both hard scientists, really. This is such a goals couple, except for licking radium all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, they get nominated for the Nobel Prize for the first time. Pierre insists that she be part of it because the committee was originally only going to offer it to him. because she's a girl.
Yeah, women aren't that smart. She's just like helping him. He's being nice, letting her help him.
Yeah. He accepts the Nobel Prize, and they intercut this with him talking about the violence of the founder of the Nobel Prize, a man named Alfred Nobel. He invented dynamite. And the story goes that one day he woke up and got the newspaper and he read his own obituary because his brother had passed, but the newspaper mistook him and his brother. The title of the obit was "The Merchant of Death is Dead."
This is why you use the internet to double check.
Yes, yes. And he was so disconcerted by it that he wanted to rethink how he would be remembered. He ended up creating the Nobel Prizes so that way he wouldn't just be remembered as a dynamite guy. So we see cut throughout this sequence the flash forward into seeing the bombing of Hiroshima. One thing that's interesting too is that Marie herself doesn't really seem to take a position on what she's created and whether it's good or bad.
She's a pure scientist.
Which is great, but also shows the darkness of like, you create something that can cure cancer, but you also create something that can blow a bunch of people up. At this point, Pierre dies, and he is coughing a lot, but that's not what kills him.
It's implied that he's moving too slowly because he's coughing. They're both physically a mess, and he even says, "Let's go to the country," and she's like, "No, it's too important that we stay here and find new ways of rubbing radium all over ourselves." He gets trampled by a horse, and you see him being dragged under. This was not how Pierre Curie actually died. Again, from Dennis Bryan. Pierre left shortly before 2:30 p.m. to keep a proofreading appointment with his publisher, Gavier Villard. As it was still raining, he opened his umbrella, heads for the publisher's office. The door is locked because workers are on strike, and he was in fact walking toward the Institute library, walking through the driving rain on an unusually crowded street. And the driver said in his testimony, sobbing, he was driving his team of horses in the right-hand lane of the Rue Dauphine when a horse cab going in the opposite direction began to pass him in the left-hand lane. Suddenly, without warning, a man in a black suit and carrying a large umbrella appeared behind the cab and stepped into the path of his left-drawn horse. The man slipped on the rain-slicked street, and as he fell, seemed almost to throw himself at the horse to grab its harness, making the horse rear in panic. Horrified onlookers yelled for the driver to stop, and he immediately pulled on the reins, but propelled by their own momentum, the horses kept moving forward. The man lost his grip and fell under the horses, where the driver lost sight of him. Other witnesses told how, to their immense relief, it seemed that the man would survive, as he had escaped being crushed by the horse's hooves and the wagon's two front iron-rimmed wheels. But to their dismay, its left rear wheel struck his head, shattering his skull and killing him instantly. The police arrived in time to save the driver from an enraged crowd that blamed him for the fatal accident and hailed several cabs to take Pierre's bloody corpse to the police station. But the cabbies refused to have their upholstery stained with blood and drove on. He was finally carried off on a stretcher.
It's awful. It's pretty awful in this movie, too, because it appears to be a hit and run with a horse carriage, which, I mean, I guess is a thing. I just had never seen one in a movie. I've never seen a hit and run executed with a horse-drawn carriage. This is a case where I'm not going to sweat the details because the essential truth of him getting killed in a hit and run accident with a horse-drawn carriage is quite present.
It wasn't even a hit and run because because the driver gave testimony to
That's true, and the driver was saved from an angry mob.
Yeah.
But
oh God, and they didn't know it was Pierre Curie.
That guy won a Nobel Prize, people. Like, pull it together and help him out. Imagine being the driver in the world of this film.
There is nothing you can possibly do with the rest of your life that can equal what this guy would have done.
Huge bummer of a death. Really sad. Marie is quite sad. Her grief is pretty devastating to witness.
Here are selections from the diary, and this is almost as sad as Tad Lincoln in the Lincoln episode saying, "I am not a president's son anymore. I won't get as many presents now," because she writes directly to Pierre, and she writes, "We put you into the coffin Saturday morning, and I held your head up for this move. We kissed your cold face for the last time," and she writes later, "Your coffin was closed, and I could see you no more. I didn't allow them to cover it with the horrible black cloth. I covered it with flowers, and I sat beside it. I am working in the laboratory all day long. It is all I can do. I am better off there than anywhere else. I conceive of nothing anymore that could give me personal joy, except perhaps scientific work, and even there no, because if I succeeded with it, I would not endure you not to know it."
I mean, she really liked him. It is a profanely shocking way to die. You're like, oh, you know how this guy's gonna die? He's gonna die of radiation, and you're like, oh, JK, he's gonna get taken out by a guy with a horse-drawn carriage.
Well, to see the skull holding a brain of that value cracked on the pavement.
Like, how dare you, sir?
How dare you, horse?
How dare you, stupid horse? Also, how dare you, driver, barely even like knowing to stop the horse before like this dude is under the axle. He's like, whoa, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? He's dead now. Your wheels just crushed him, asshole. What are you gonna do tomorrow? Are you gonna cure cancer?
No. So Marie is devastated, as we've said, so she has an affair with Langevin. The guy that we'd commented looked like Pierre and that it was confusing. But his wife sends their letters to the papers. His wife is dumb and boring and reminds me of an American. This seriously makes me think less of French people because they're being so puritanical about it. The whole point of French people was that they're chill about affairs.
We've sent so many of our problem men to France where they've prospered, be it Roman Polanski or Johnny Depp or Woody Allen. We send them all to France because France doesn't care. And for some reason in this movie, the French people are outside of her house like she is Marie Antoinette and scream about how she is a slut on a hot tin roof.
And Polish whore, get out of our country. And they call her a dirty Jew, and she says to her sister, "I've remarked that I'm a dirty Catholic and a lapsed one at that." You and I both wrote almost simultaneously, "Since when do the French people care about cheating on your spouse?" And "Since when do the French care about people's sex lives?" It could once again be because she's a woman.
She's still like in a lot of grief though, and ultimately he says like he's gonna leave her because it's the right thing to do, and she's like, fine, go. And then she takes a job at the Sorbonne because I guess she has to.
She has extreme male brain, and I love it.
She's like, I'll take it, I guess. Don't give it to me because you feel sorry for me, okay? I love it.
And then there's what I guess it's intended to show her level of how much she misses her husband, but it just seems false. She is with Loie Fuller outside the building where the seance lady practiced, and the seance lady has died, and Marie starts demanding that Loie Fuller bring her husband back, and it just feels off.
It is a really weird choice for this character because she is so science based and has expressed that she doesn't believe in this stuff, and maybe this is supposed to show us that she does, but it doesn't pay off at any point after this unless you count the times that she thinks she sees him places. But not like Marie Curie all of a sudden became spiritualist.
Yeah.
And it's the only scene like that I would say walks up to Oscar Bation in this film. This isn't a particularly showy performance, but this scene is.
It's the sobbing, it's that Wayne's World scene of where he's going, "I never learned to read," where Oscar speech is flashing on the screen.
It's really like very like get her the damn pills in terms of endearment. But we're veering into something that doesn't feel
Yeah.
germane to this character necessarily. She finds out she's going to get another Nobel Prize.
Mm-hmm.
And she is...
They tell her in the telegram, like, we'd prefer you didn't go. So she takes her older daughter, Irene, with her to pick up the award. And
she gets up to accept it. And they're sort of like, oh, you're here. Great.
And we saw another thing that never happens where one person stands to clap and then it's
the slow clap
that turns into
the standing ovation, the slow clap standing O. And again, like, they don't want her to come because she's a giant dirty whore, and all of a sudden we're in North Carolina, like, where, like, she's a stain on science. And we must not speak of her. But she recovers from that. We do a jump, skip ahead, and her daughter is now turned into Anya Taylor-Joy.
her eyeballs are the size of most people's entire cheeks.
I'm not going to say anything new about her that other people haven't said, but there's an etherealness to her that makes her not look human.
I mean, maybe she's the next phase of human evolution. They show aliens having gigantic eyes. Maybe she's the start of all that.
She does seem like her beauty has evolved into something beyond human. All of this to say, it's kind of surprising to see her being a World War I nurse.
She's also a scientist, and she brings home a we have such a fun scene where Marie is doing what the dad normally does in being the person who gives the third degree. And it's so fun for me and so in character what she cares about.
He's like, I love your daughter. And she's like, okay, do you have a PhD?
Right. She's like right off, like, I really hope you're someone who doesn't make small talk. Oh, good. You love my daughter? Great. Let's talk about science. Yeah. I loved it. Just found, yeah.
I respect her priorities. Yeah.
Yeah, because small talk sucks a lot.
It can. In the last 15 minutes of this movie, they do something astonishing that pisses me off and is a demonstration of the flaw of the flyover Wikipedia entry biopic.
Can you explain what you mean by the flyover biopic? Because this came from a very interesting thread that you had earlier today on our Blue Sky account.
Someone had pointed out, like, that, you know, so many interesting people's stories come out in biopics. Like, there's option of taking like one crazy incident from someone's life and honing in on it to tell that story and using that as a showplace to talk about the person's life, which tends to be my preference in a biopic. It's like the Aaron Sorkin model.
That worked so beautifully in Lincoln.
15 minutes before the movie is over, Anya Taylor-Joy is like, you need to get involved in the war effort because World War I is going on and people are getting these catastrophic injuries.
She brings out 3 soldiers who are all missing various limbs or unable to use various limbs and introduces them, and then Marie says hello, and then finally on the third one Marie is like, why are you doing this? This is a case where I'd appreciate a person being blunt, because how are you going to pussyfoot that?
Yeah.
And like, she knows that she needs to show her mother bluntly. Neither of them has social skills, so neither of them is put off by anything.
We see that Marie dedicated a lot of her life, and there's some attribution of her death having to do with her concentrated time in the field dealing with using radiation technology.
She was driving primitive X-ray technology around in vans.
I would love to spend time in this particular chapter of her life. You could make a really great story where you're seeing those arresting visuals, where you could talk about her personal history instead of her fear of hospitals as a driving force behind any of her choices.
This must be the 15th time that we've mentioned how dumb the whole fear of hospitals thing is.
It's really dumb. It doesn't pay off in any compelling way, but like, you could take Marie's personal history, her mother having tuberculosis
and not kissing her
not
children,
being able to kiss her, and you could take the fact that she lost her incredibly brilliant partner in a stupid accident. And you could use those as the driving, motivating forces behind her wanting to go into the field to treat these men.
They mention in the credits, she makes friends with Albert Einstein, and he's a great ally, and he's like, yeah, I cheat too. It's total BS that you have to deal with this.
That's a movie too. There's ways that you could tell the story of this prickly, fascinating, brilliant woman and put more action around what is happening. There's almost a quality to her that is, she could be in motion more, I guess.
The way that Pike has of moving as her, it's like this like jerky jump.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a nerd.
To put like this really compelling chapter of her life where she has pushed the science as far as she has pushed it, and she is using that science for a non-debatable good in a time period too where the science, the medical technology that came out of World War One is fascinating because so many people survived catastrophic injuries because they were able to treat so many things, but then people were left without limbs, they were left without noses, and just all of like the interesting things that were done to help these men live the rest of their lives. And the science that was done and everything is so interesting.
This is why I feel like this podcast is a complicated Valentine to a flawed subgenre. So often in these films, my frustration is you don't want to make the storytelling too and then-y, but then in trying to get it to adhere to rules of storytelling formula when real life is cyclical and doesn't have a perfect arc, is that they jettison fascinating real parts of someone's story and replace them with fake things that make no sense.
Like, how dare you, movie? How dare you?
Sarah said, how dare you, movie? Take a drink, everyone.
How dare you stick Marie Curie and Albert Einstein's friendship in an epilogue title card? What are we doing?
And it's right, while wasting time on this hospital thing that never happened, when her mother not being a big liar, but not kissing her children because of tuberculosis seems far more poignant and traumatizing in a real way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of material that got on the table for a better movie. Like I would have loved to have seen her engaged with an intellectual equal in that way in this movie.
See her with her husband.
But their romantic relationships overlays that in a way that like her just talking to Einstein and developing a friendship with him.
The men that are possibly her peers, she's the foremost, but she's not respected on the faculty. And I am sure that at least half these dudes have mistresses. Humanizing genius on film is hard, although geniuses also love to snuggle their grandchildren.
This is kind of where it starts to wrap up. She knows she's sick. She lives for like another 20 years after she gets involved with the war effort, give or take, depending on what year it was when she got involved.
Well, she dies in 1930, 20 years after.
Yeah, we see her now walking through a sort of this is your life kind of set where she's seeing the future. She's seeing Chernobyl. She's seeing Hiroshima. She's seeing the bomb testing.
She sees individuals in beds who we see in these scenes set in the future. And at one point, she kisses the soldier on the face. Is this supposed to be... Did they sneak an inner child moment in here on me, going back to when her mom says, kiss me and you can cure me? And it's, oh, she saved the soldier. So she did, her life journey has been to saving someone. This makes me want to burn down every film school.
You know, it's not an inner child, but I do feel like a person from your past showing up to walk you to heaven or wherever, at the end of the movie should be its own special sort of like tropey hellhole that we do not abide by.
Which is what happens. Like, she finds Pierre in the hospital and they walk down a corridor and oh good God, this hospital corridor leads to the black box from Liz and Dick.
He says, like, you changed the world. Like, there's so much on the nose stuff that, like, I almost don't have a nose left. Like, once again, like, in case you couldn't pick up on it, this movie has, like, some science for dummies stuff in it, which I appreciated as someone who has written a term paper about the book Valley of the Dolls. I need stuff like that, but I just want to make sure that it's very clear there's nothing inaccessible in this movie. And they're like, just in case you are a vegetable, we're going to tell you exactly what you should be picking up here, even though we've already told you what you should be picking up here because it's obvious. And he literally says, you changed the world. You helped people. She's kind of like iffy about it, which I loved. She's like, yeah, maybe. She dies, and then we get all of these title cards about stuff that we didn't get to see in the movie, like when she became friends with Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wrote a note. I will allow you to make up exactly what happened here if you just show me this
Friendship.
Well,
but maybe the problem was that she had Crayon Dude writing this instead of Tony Kushner.
That's true. I don't know that this writer who seems to work steadily, once again, probably did more today than I've done in my entire life.
Yeah.
But
he had some very respectable credits, and now I feel bad for calling him Crayon Guy.
But nevertheless, I would imagine that writing the dialogue between Marie Curie and Albert Einstein would be pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
And then she dies. I have a fun game.
Okay.
As I was watching this, because it was very boring, I started thinking about, well, let me go back a minute. I mentioned I watched Chernobyl recently. That movie contains two super duper hotties, Stellan Skarsgård and Jared Harris.
Oh, yes.
And while Stellan Skarsgård does not play a scientist in that movie, he plays a general who is bought into the science that Jared Harris is trying to get everyone to understand in that movie. So I'm counting him in this, as I am also counting some other ancillary people. I just wanted to run down some of the nuclear scientists in film and whether or not they are attractive.
You mean the nuclear scientist is played by the actor?
Exactly.
Okay, and I may need pictures because you're the film and actor person.
Okay, we're going to start with one Jack Lemmon from The China Syndrome.
Oh, yeah, I'm reading like 70s Silver Fox off of that. And Jack Lemmon, I normally think of him as like goofy and bad golfer.
Yeah, but dreamy.
Here.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know who else is foxy as heck in China Syndrome but is not a scientist? Is Michael Douglas.
Oh, well, that's baby Michael Douglas, yeah. Of course.
Hello. Next one. Wilford Brimley in The China Syndrome.
No.
Do you know how old he is in this movie?
56.
No.
32.
No. He's 49. He was never young.
Yeah.
He was never young. Do we need to talk about Stellan Skarsgård and Jared Harris?
We've already established their foxes.
Are you on board? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Okay, we have Meryl Streep as Karen Silkwood.
Was she a scientist? I thought she was just someone who worked at the...
So I just listened to a podcast about Karen Silkwood. She had done study in chemistry, and the job required her to have a science background.
Well, yes, it's Meryl Streep.
Look at those cheekbones in this movie.
Yes, that is worth jumping the fence for.
Denise Richards as Dr. Christmas Jones.
Oh, come on.
In the World Is Not Enough.
Oh, come on. I don't buy her as a scientist.
And yet she was. She was a nuclear physicist in that movie.
This is not a real question, Sarah.
And none of this is a real question.
Of course.
Okay, I got a good one for you. Actor Dwight Schultz.
Who?
Exactly. He was on the A-Team, and he played J. Robert Oppenheimer in a movie from the 80s called Fat Man and Little Boy, starring Paul Newman, about the creation of the bomb told from the perspective of Matt Damon in Oppenheimer. Hot or not?
I think so.
Yeah.
Conventionally, but I generally prefer conventional.
He doesn't have like the Cillian Murphy, like, Hall of Death.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy had an unnerving quality to him that felt more like what you see emanating from photos of the real Oppenheimer.
I don't think America was ready for an actor who looked like Oppenheimer in the 80s. We were barely ready for Daniel Day-Lewis in the 80s.
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy is a very attractive person. He's scary AF in Oppenheimer. Just like his mien is very intimidating and weird and off-putting, but he's brilliant in it. But like, we weren't ready for a guy to look like this guy.
Yeah.
And be in a movie.
Well, not in a mass market movie.
Yeah.
Maybe in like Cronenberg's version.
What about Peter Sellers in Dr. Strangelove?
No.
Okay.
So many times you're dealing with that the actor is...
He seems like a really bad person based on every single thing I've ever heard about him.
Okay.
Okay, next one.
Bryan Cranston in Godzilla. Well, he's your boyfriend.
Oh no, are you going to steal my imaginary boyfriend?
I'm worried I'm worried that you're going to act like Mrs. Langevin.
You whore, you Polish whore who creates science that's bad for people. You going to steal my daddy issues? It's okay. You look very concerned about the fact that I just called you a Polish whore.
I don't know whether Polish applies.
Okay, last one. Dabney Coleman in War Games.
Hitler mustache, no.
I do not care for the mustache. The hair is kind of fabulous.
I was expecting that you were going to hit me with Walter Matthau in IQ, and I was going to tell you to get that travesty out of my face.
No, never. I don't even pretend that movie's real.
I grew up in Princeton, and everyone made such a fuss in the town when they were filming IQ there, and there was this one day where they put 1950s prices on the parking meters, and it came out, and it was so bad.
They didn't make movies where I grew up. Deep Throat was challenged for the first time being shown in my hometown.
You grew up in the town where they burned teachers at the stake for being over 36.
Unless they were men, and then they just let them show Gandhi
in class
for months at a time on repeat. With that, though, we've said our piece on this film.
I did have two pieces of choice dialogue.
Oh, yes, please share.
When Pierre says to Marie, "You're not selfish, you're self-absorbed." And when Marie sticks it to the misogynist French scientists who probably all have mistresses, "We are here to tell you, you have fundamentally misunderstood the atom."
I liked that one. I did also like the comment about her being a dirty Catholic and a lapsed one at that. We can all relate. I liked the line where she was speaking with her sister about the baby. "Your child is crying. Shouldn't you assume some sort of motherly disposition?" I don't know if you've ever been anywhere where you've been tempted to say to someone with a crying baby, "Excuse me, your baby is crying. Are you going to do something about that?" Should I give our listeners a quick refresher about how we score the movies?
Yes.
Okay. We rate movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to specific issues, particular to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes. And with that out of the way, let's score this thing. I'll take you through mine.
Okay.
Outward appearances, I gave it an 8. Acting and casting, 8. Passage of time, I gave it a 4. Costuming, 7. Quality of the script, I gave it a 4. Most of that being awards for ideas and not execution. Accuracy, I gave it a 3. Storytelling, I gave it a 5 again. Ideas, not execution. And I'm counting the visuals in there. Production value, I gave it an 8. I thought that it was so visually interesting to look at, and the money was on the screen. Production, direction, decision making, 7. Do we care? 5. I don't care.
We were really on the same page this week. A lot.
Wow, excellent.
So, outward appearances, makeup and hair, I gave it a 7. Some of the aging makeup looked a little bit powdery to me. Acting and casting, I gave it an 8. Passage of time, I gave it a 4. Costuming, 7. Quality of the script, I gave it a 3. Accuracy, I gave it a 3. Storytelling, I gave it a 4. Production value, because those stunning visuals counted into it, I gave it an 8. Production, direction, decision making, I gave it a 5. And do we care, I gave it a 4, which brings my total to 5.5. And yours
Amazing,
was?
5.8.
Okay.
Radioactive, you are middling. I've already forgotten that I watched you.
Radioactive, you scored a 5.65. You did not earn second opinion.
Yep. First of all, I want to talk about other stuff that you should watch instead. I welcome anyone to put this on with the sound down and see if there is an album that can sync up with it. Maybe it's Steely Dan's Asia. Maybe it's Kid A. Maybe it's Oasis's Greatest Hits. I don't know.
I think a more recent Radiohead might sync up to it.
Yeah.
Watch Oppenheimer.
Do watch Oppenheimer. Also watch The China Syndrome because Jack Lemmon, Silver Fox era must be seen.
Chernobyl.
Speaking of Silver Fox eras, Stellan Skarsgård beating the telephone to death is some foxy stuff.
Yes. This week, we have a new unit called Retractions, Apologies, and Listener Mailbag. Since no one emailed the listener mailbag, that is out. But
we have a retraction and an apology. I don't apologize. Nevertheless, we do apparently have to apologize for something we said in a previous episode that turned out to be misinformation. Tell me what we were wrong about.
So, episode 26, Liz and Dick, contained inaccuracies regarding the large pearl which Richard Burton purchased for Elizabeth Taylor. I made reference to this having been owned by Marie Tudor. It turns out that was a different pearl. It is something where the scholarship has differed. I may at one point have read sources that state that the pearl worn by Marie Tudor or given to her by Philip of Spain was, centuries later, the one that Richard Burton purchased for Elizabeth Taylor. The Burton Taylors did look for portraits showing Marie Tudor wearing the same thing, so I will say that as far as the Burton Taylors believed, it was the same pearl, however, apparently different pearl. And also, I stated that one of Elizabeth Taylor's dogs swallowed the pearl and they had to extract it from the dog. Also not the case. The dog merely chewed on the pearl. It found this quote on Wikipedia. In her book, Elizabeth Taylor, My Love Affair with Jewelry, it looked like one of them was chewing on a bone, but neither of them had given bones to the puppies. And Taylor continues, I just casually opened the puppy's mouth, and inside his mouth was the most perfect pearl in the world. It was, thank God, not scratched.
Wait, this isn't an important part of the story here, but it is important to enhance the visual of chaos in which these two people lived. Puppies? So not just a dog.
Not a dog nor a puppy, plural puppies.
Adding a new level of chaos is the existence of, I'm certain, poorly managed dogs. Living on a boat.
No, it was at their suite at Caesar's Palace in Paradise, Nevada.
Of course it was.
In terms of the pearl having never belonged to Mary I of England, it was found in 1579, 21 years after Mary Tudor died, and the pearl in her portraits is a different pearl. So, I am sorry, I was wrong. I referred to something I had seen around that I assumed to be true, going off the cuff, and I was historically inaccurate, both in reference to the Burton Taylor's dogs and to jewelry owned by Mary Tudor, and I'm sorry.
I'm so mad at you.
Why are you mad at
I'm
me?
kidding. Oh my God.
Okay, Sarah, can you please take us out?
I would be happy to. If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is at Biopic a Podcast Story, so do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of the movies that we've done so far. And as I mentioned, we are now on Blue Sky. Search us up there, Biopic a Podcast Story. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about Marie Antoinette, directed by Sofia Coppola, with our third special guest, Belle from Silhouettes of Fashion History podcast, who we're super excited to have on.
Yes, we are. It's a really fun episode, and she is delightful and magical, and we really had a good time chatting with her.
Yes, we recorded the January 14th episode before the January 7th episode, but unfortunately this time loop did not give us any special knowledge of the future.
The magic is dead.
The magic is dead, along with the year 2024, which ends in half an hour. Anyway, see you next week, and Happy New Year!
Yes, Happy New Year. Thank you for listening.